come to Houston about once a year, and I was in Houston about a year ago. And I was talking about why we care about a changing climate. And at that time, a lot of people were wondering, well, why do we care about a changing climate? And now, a year later, I feel like almost every single person in the room probably has a story that after tonight you will realize relates directly to a changing climate. When we think about climate change, if we were going to design a book cover on a book about global warming, and you had to pick a picture to put on the cover of that book, a picture that encapsulates the problem of global warming, about 9 out of 10 people would pick a picture of a what? Thank you. I didn't even have to say it's white or furry or big. Yes, the number one image associated with a changing climate or global warming is a polar bear sitting on a piece of small ice looking sad. Sometimes, if we're a little bit more aware of how climate is already changing and affecting people around the world, sometimes we might pick a picture of people living very far away from us who we will never probably see or visit, who are also being impacted. And this highlights what I believe is one of the most dangerous myths that the greatest number of people have bought into. We often fixate on the idea that people reject science or that people don't think climate is changing or that we don't think humans are responsible. But I think the greatest myth that the largest number of people have bought into is that climate change is a distant issue, that it only affects future generations or people or places that live far away. And I'm going to show you some evidence for this. This is one of my favorite series of maps. It comes from the Yale Climate Communication Program. So if you want to see these maps online, just Google Yale Climate Opinion Maps, and they'll pop right up. What they do is they show us people's opinion about questions. Now, anywhere that's orange is greater than 50%. Anywhere that's blue is less than 50%. And they give you people's opinions by county, by state, and even by congressional district, which is very interesting. You can pull out your own district yourself if you want to. But I'm going to show you all of the United States. So if you ask people around the whole United States, do you think global warming will harm plants and animals? Everybody just says yes, right? Pretty dark orange across the whole country. Then do you say, do you think global warming will harm future generations? Yes. Everybody's pretty sure that it will harm plants and animals in future generations. Do you think it will harm people in developing countries? We're starting to get a little bit of blue here, but it's still mostly orange. So we think it will harm plants and animals, future generations, and people who live in countries where most of us don't. But then it says, do you think people who live in the United States are already being harmed now or will be harmed in the next 10 years? So this is people who live in the States. We're getting a little bluer. Now, wait, there's one better. Do you think it will harm you personally? No. The vast majority of us do not think that it matters to us. And so that is why it is such a dangerous myth, because if it doesn't really matter to me, why should I do anything about it? And in fact, I think the myth continues a little bit to the point where it says if it ever becomes a problem, someone else will fix it. Now, at this point, you may be thinking, or you may know somebody who would be thinking, but hang on for just a second here. How do we know this thing is even real? And if it is, why is it a big deal? So let's just take a little digression for a minute into what are we even talking about here that we're wondering about whether people care about it or not. Because we know that normally our weather goes up and down from day to day and year to year. We can have heat and cold, we can have wet, and we can have dry. And if we live in Texas, it looks more like this. I don't know if you know, but Lubbock has many good qualities. Who here has been to Lubbock? Okay, there you go, all right. So 5 years ago, Lubbock won a very important contest. You hear about this one? It was a contest between Caribou, Maine, that's actual town, not an animal, Fargo, North Dakota, Fargo, Fairbanks, Alaska, and Lubbock, Texas, for the toughest weather city in America. And guess who won? The same year, just to put us in our place, though, they had a different contest. The National Association of Realtors had a contest for which city was the most boring city, and we also won that one. I really don't understand that, because if you're having a conversation with somebody who you don't know that well, what is the first thing you always talk about with them? The weather? I cannot explain it. But the point is that if we live in Texas, we know that we get crazy weather all the time. In fact, we get just about every type of crazy and severe weather that you can imagine. Okay, I want you to do something here. I want you to add up on your fingers how many types of different weather events we get in Texas. And I'll give you the first one, tornadoes. Add up on your fingers and see what number you get. How many crazy weather and climate type events do we get in Texas? How many different kinds? I hear people counting out loud too, that's good. All right, how many people have come up with at least 5 different kinds? Good, you've lived in Texas at least a year. How many people have come up with 7 or 8? Okay, you've lived in Texas even longer. Anybody got 10? Oh, a few got 10. Okay, let's see how far we can go. All right. Tornadoes, hailstorms, blizzards, dust storms, hurricanes, floods, droughts, ice storms. Some people would say haboobs are even worse than dust storms, so we can count those too. Supercell thunderstorms. Oh, I'm up to 10. What did I miss? Any ones I missed? Wildfires. Yes, earthquakes are not weather and climate, unfortunately, but they still are extreme. Yeah, so we're over 10 things. So no wonder we win contests like this. There we go. So here's the thing, though. Weather is what we remember. We all remember weather, don't we? Everybody has a weather story. And we know that those types of events already put us at risk naturally. We know that Houston is already at risk from coastal flooding, from heavy rainfall events, from hurricanes, of course. But we know that we also have droughts, we have water shortages, we have record-breaking fires. In fact, if you look at all of the weather and climate disasters in the United States that have caused at least $1 billion worth of damage, you know which state is number 1? That is, I know the font is a little bit small, that is 99 events since 1980. Isn't that crazy? And this affects us, right? These are just a few of the headlines that we see. Fire danger increasing, heat wave and drought poses a threat to trees across Houston. City crews were forced to cut down thousands of trees because the older plants couldn't deal with lack of rain. A Phoenix-bound flight was forced to return to Houston because of weather conditions. It was too hot to land the plane, because if it's too hot, the air isn't dense enough. We know that we deal with weather all the time, but what we often don't realize is that weather is the average, is the up and down, up and down. Climate is the long-term average. So weather is like a single tree. It's what happens in a certain place at a certain time. Climate is the long-term average of weather over at least 20 to 30 years. We are really good at remembering weather. We all have a weather story we can share, right? Do you remember some crazy weather event that you lived through? Did you live in Houston over the past 12 months? We do. But to remember climate, you know what you would have to do to remember climate? You would have to be able to add up the average temperature and rainfall on every single day of the year, not for 1 year, not for 5 years, for at least 20 to 30 years, and you would have to be able to fit a trend line through it in your head to see if it was changing. Now, I'm going to be asked to be honest here. Who can do that in your head? My hand is not really up. Thank you. Everybody here is honest. We can't do that. Our brains are not built to comprehend climate. We are great at weather. We are terrible at understanding climate. But climate matters vitally. In fact, our society is built on the assumption that climate is stable. Why does climate matter? Well, a geographer back in 1901 said, a statement that is often attributed to Mark Twain, but nope, it was a geographer. He said, climate is what we expect and weather is what we get. I would add to that, and this is me, climate is what we plan for in the future. It's the average. We expect summer to be a certain way. We expect winter to be a certain way. We expect our power bill to look like this in the summer when we turn on the air conditioning. We expect a certain amount of water we're going to use to water our lawn. Climate is what we plan for in the future, and weather is what we remember in the past. Now, this is starting to give us a clue as to why climate is so important, because when we plan for the future, we're planning for average climate. What type of planning am I talking about? Let me give you a couple of concrete examples. What are our building codes based on? Climate. How big an air conditioner, how much insulation you need. What type of crops we grow, where, when, and how? Climate. Flood zones. Climate. Water plan. Climate. Our energy resources, our food, our water, our infrastructure, even our economy, even national security, it is all built on the assumption that, let me go back here and show you again, it's built on the assumption that we can have ups and downs, hot and cold, wet and dry, but the assumption is it all averages out in the end. That is the assumption that our entire society is built on. It's like the roads out in Lubbock. And I know now at least 2/3 of you have been there, so you know what I'm talking about. You drive up from Lubbock, you drive north on I-27 towards Plainview. And you're driving up on a road that is so dead straight that you could stay on that road in your lane if you were driving along looking in the rearview mirror. I'm not going to ask if you've ever done it. I hope you haven't. Please don't. But you could. Why? Because that road is dead straight. So where you were 5 minutes ago, 1 minute ago, 30 seconds ago is a perfect predictor of where you're going to be in the future because the road is absolutely straight. Until when? Until just before you get to Plainview, Texas, there is a giant curve in the road with a row of concrete grain silos on the curve. What happens if you're driving up the road looking in the rearview mirror? I don't need an answer. I hope you all know. They'll be collecting driver's licenses at the back if you don't. How is this relevant to climate? It's because planning for the future based on the past works great when the road is straight and when climate is not changing. But if climate is changing, then we're going to be planning for conditions that don't even exist anymore. And we're going to be running off the road. And today, we are already hearing the noise of our wheels on the rumble strip. Because today, climate is changing. The assumption that we've built our society on, that the long-term average is stable, is no longer valid. So why do we humans, not polar bears, why do we humans care about a changing climate? We care about it because it is altering future conditions that affect what? It affects our infrastructure, our resources, our health, our economy, and more. All the things that make up modern society. It isn't just the fact that the long-term average is changing, though there's more to it. Our variability is increasing too. Why does that matter? It matters because if we already have a lot of variability, which again we do, right? We have more than any other state in the country. That means we have more of it to be exacerbated by a changing climate. So the first reason we care is because it's changing our baseline conditions, but the second reason we care is because it takes our natural risks that already exist. Droughts are natural, floods are natural, hurricanes are natural. All of these weather phenomena are natural events, but they're being exacerbated by a changing climate. That is why we care.